For the past 5 years, I've had in my sewing plans to sew storage organizational cubes for sorting my winter tights, and today is the day. I don't know what it is that we will make time to sew things we want for others, but then we don't make the time to sew for ourselves. I'm glad that day is here for me, and I'm trying to get better about making things for myself that I want and need. I've made this cube pattern several times. I made one for my friend Kathy for her desk at work, and I made a few for the boys. The medium size is perfect for storing a plain deck of Pokemon cards. This is just the pattern that I like to sew. It is pretty and it is practical. It is something I need, and I'm going to make it special with the fabric I use. Now, I have not changed my mind on the fabric choice. This is a fabric I picked out 5 years ago when I first decided I wanted to make these cubes, and it is a Ruby Star Society fabric. I love the bright boldness, and this is a great way of bringing in a fabric to your life that you love, but you wouldn't wear. I wouldn't wear anything this bright. And I love the birds. My husband and his siblings are bird watchers, and I like to sprinkle a little bird decor. Not too much, but a little bit here and there. If you were to come into my home, you would see birds sprinkled throughout our decor. Now, when I mentioned this to Charlie a couple of years ago, he just rolled his eyes, but it makes me think of him, so I'm continuing to do that. This project also fits in my January plans of making something fun for me. I have everything I need here. This is the main fabric for the outer part. It is a fully lined cube, and I did think about using the same fabric since I have so much of it, but since we're doing a sew along, I thought I would use a solid fabric. I had this chunk of chambray. It wasn't enough left over to make anything, but it was enough for the storage cube. So I'm using this for the lining. I also have some foam. This is by Annie's Soft and Stable. This is going to be used for the exterior. It will give some body to the cube. And then the lining is also interfaced, and I will be using Pellon SF101 for the lining. Today I'm using a pattern. It is a paid-for pattern by So Sweetness. It is the desktop cube set. It's part of the season 1 of Minikins. Since it is a paid-for pattern, I'm not going to be giving you cutting dimensions. I think you could figure out how to make this to any size you want. I'm going to be linking the pattern below. I did buy the pattern. There were several things in this collection that I wanted, and I was more than happy to buy the pattern. I have already sewn one cube. I have to confess, I cut the pattern pieces out last night, and I just couldn't help myself. I had to sew this up. It came together really quickly. So one of the design features I like about the cube is that the front is a little shorter than the back. You can easily see inside, pick out what you want, and I think it's super cute. Sarah Lawson describes this size as being perfect for yarn, and if you're a quilter, I understand 3 jelly rolls will fit in the large size. I have made many So Sweetness patterns, and I always pick up a tip from Sarah. And one tip that I picked up was how to sew in a square bottom, and I'm going to be sharing that with you today. It was a game changer for me. I have all my pattern pieces cut out. I did save a little time on my lining fabric since I was using the Pellon SF101, which is an iron-on interfacing. I block fused strips of my lining fabric that were a little bit larger than the dimensions I needed. And then I cut them all out so it saved on the individual cuts I needed to make. This pattern has 5 pieces, so it's 5 pieces of each: the lining, the foam, the interfacing, and the main fabric. So block fusing did save me time. I do not block fuse the foam. I have had terrible luck with iron-on foam. Let me know if you know any tricks to it. But I tried that early in my bag making and it was a mess. I would iron on my fabric and I would get wrinkles on my wrinkles. And what a chore to try to get all the wrinkles out, and I never got it out perfect. I switched to a sew-in foam. I used the by Annie Soft and Stable, and I've been very happy with this. So we're going to head over to the sewing machine. We're going to baste our foam to the fabric. Today I'm sewing on Lucille. She's my Juki. I have placed my main fabric wrong sides to the foam, and I have clipped all around the edges. This foam tends to want to grip the fabric, so these are just to keep me honest. I've lengthened my stitch to 4, and I'm making sure that I am basting within the seam allowance. My seam allowance is 1/4 inch. Let me bring you in close so you can see what I'm doing. I am well inside my seam allowance. This is where the 1/4 inch seam allowance mark is, and I am just inside my presser foot here. I have my stitch length to 4, and I'm just going to work my way around. Unpin as I go. All right, I have that basted in. I'll finish my pile and I will meet you at the cutting table. The foam is attached, and now I'm going to take you down to the cutting table to show you the trick on how to install a square or rectangular bottom easily and accurately. I've paid attention to how my fabric is oriented because I want to make a line along the bottom. So this is the bottom, and I need to make a line at 1/4 inch, and I'm just going to use my friction pen and a ruler. I'm going to find the 1/4 inch mark from the bottom and just draw a line. This friction pen will erase with heat, but this is all going to be right on the seam allowance, so I don't think it matters anyway. So for each of my pattern pieces, both the exterior and for the lining, I'm going to mark 1/4 inch. Now you'll notice here that some of that foam has spread a little bit, so I'm going to give it a little trim, little haircut. Sometimes that happens as you compress the foam, it stretches out. But I can just get rid of that easily. I'm going to sew the 4 sides of my cube, and then I'm going to come back here and I'm going to show you how we install the bottom to where it fits in nice and neat, and it is quick and easy. I'm going to start off sewing my front piece to the side pieces. I've got them oriented in the correct direction. I'm lining up my edges, and I'm just going to put a couple of wonder clips in. I'm going to start sewing at the top at 1/4 inch seam allowance. I'm going to sew all the way down, and I'm going to stop right on the 1/4 inch line, and I'm going to secure that stitch. I've changed my stitch length back to 2.5, and this time I'm going to be sewing at 1/4 inch seam allowance. When I was basting, I basted at about 1/8 of an inch seam allowance. You can see I'm approaching the bottom. And I'm going to reverse, lock that in, and cut my thread. So I have attached one side. Now I'm going to attach the other side. Short ends together. Start at the top, lock that thread in. I'm going to come all the way down. And I'm going to be sure to stop 1/4 inch from the bottom, lock it in. There we go. So all we have to do is install the back in the same manner. and we'll have something of a column. And I will do this. I'll meet you at the cutting table and I will show you how we're going to install the bottom. I have all 4 sides of my cube sewn, and this is where you're going to see why we left that 1/4 inch unsewn at the bottom of the bag. Can you see how I can pull back those corners and I can get to the corners of each panel on this side and on these sides all the way around? This is how we are going to sew this and not have any holes in our cube and get a perfectly square, nice flat bottom. So I'm pulling this back and I'm lining this corner with this corner, and I'm going to line them up and I'm going to put a clip in. This foam's fighting me a little bit. It wants to jump out of camera range. And then here, you can see where it's open. I'm going to line that corner up. I'm going to put a clip, or you can use pins. And I'm going to stick another one in the middle. This, when I take it over to the sewing machine, I'm going to sew it with the bottom of the bag on the sewing bed. And I'm going to begin my stitching. Of course, I'm going to be sewing a 1/4 inch seam allowance. I'm going to start stitching right here at the seam allowance. And I'm going to use these previous stitching where I sewed the sides as my guide. I'm going to go from one end to the other. Of course, I'm going to secure my stitches, and that way I'm going to complete this stitch. The bottom will be entirely sewn on this side, or this piece. This is a side piece. It'll be sewn completely with no holes, and I'm just going to do one side at a time. So I'm going to pin this, I'm going to sew that side, then I'm going to come to the other side. I will pull this back, I will match up the corner, and I will pin, and I will sew this in the same manner from the side seam all the way to the next side seam, securing all the way around until I have installed the bottom of my bag. And I'll do the same for the lining. Here I have already sewn one edge of my bottom in, and you can see I started here, sewed all the way across and stopped here, and then next I'll be sewing this side. So let me get these sewn together and then I'll show you the next step. We are so close to having our finished cubes. I have my cube, the outer is finished, and then I have my lining. Now, if you have sewn a bag where you've birthed a bag, it's very similar with the cubes. I'm going to keep my lining wrong side out, and I'm going to place this cube inside. And let me find the front, which is the shorter side. I've placed my outer inside my lining, and I'm going to go and match up my corners first and secure it with a clip. I knew immediately this would be perfect for tights. I think when it is no longer cold and I'm not wanting to wear tights, I will probably use these for socks. I don't know if you're like me. I have so many pairs of socks that I wear the same few over and over again. Maybe this will help me decide how many do I really need to have. I'm sure what I have right now is too many. I have managed to shove the entire outer fabric into my lining, and I've lined up my side seams, and I've clipped it all the way across the top. You will notice on the back, I have a section that is big enough for my hand to fit in that I'm going to leave open. I'm going to sew a 1/4 inch seam allowance all along the top. I'm leaving this section open. I'm going to back tack back and forth a couple of times to make this strong, because I will have to pull a little bit to get it to come out, and I don't want to pop my stitches. So I'm going to sew this, and then we will birth this cube together. I've sewn all the way around the cube, and you can see where I've left a really strong tack back so that when I birth this, it will not pop. So I'm going to reach my hand in. I think I left an opening about 3.5 to 4 inches, and I'm just going to gently pull the bag through. Gently work it through. I have found that if I put my thumbs on the inside, I can encourage it to come through a little more, but just have patience. Gently work it through. Patience is not my strong suit, by the way, but it does pay off. It's coming through nice and easy. I'll just gently pull it the rest of the way through and give it a little shake, and voila, we're very close to finishing. So I'm going to shove this lining back in the bag. See if there are any corners that need poking out. And I'm going to push the lining in with my fingers as I roll the seam. I really don't want to see the lining from the outside. So I'm just going to work it around. I'm going to hit this with the iron, but I want to show this cube whose boss. Put a few clips in as I roll the lining, just so that it kind of creates a memory of where it's supposed to be. I'm going to work my way around. When I get to the back of the bag where I've left the opening, right here, I'm going to fold that in the 1/4 inch, both the lining and the outer. I'm going to give it a little pull with my fingers, and I'm going to clip it. I am going to come back and revisit this after I iron it, just to make sure that I like the way it looks and get it as neat as possible. I mean, it is a storage cube for my tights, but why not make it as neat as possible? I'm going to continue pinning all the way around. I'm going to hit it with an iron, and then when I get it to where it's just where I want it to be, I'm going to top stitch 1/8 of an inch all around the top. That will secure the lining so it doesn't poke out, and it will close that opening in the back. I think these turned out really cute. I love a pretty and practical make. I've already stuffed it with my tights. I've got them sorted by color, and I get about 4 or 5 pairs of tights into each cube. This definitely ticks off my list for my January plans of sewing something fun just for me. If you want to see my video where I talk about how I set my sewing plans, I'll link it over here. And I have something really fun planned for February, and I will see you soon.